How's that?
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne.
Hello. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders both past and present. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much, Anne. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jason Cronk, very exciting, live from the USA, who's going to take us through a Privacy by Design 101 Lunch and Learn on International Privacy Day. Jason is the author of the IAPP textbook, Strategic Privacy by Design, which I have here in my hands. I was fortunate to attend a workshop back in 2019. Jason holds the CIPT, CIPM, CIPP, US and FIP designations. His unique background includes various entrepreneurial pursuits, strong information technology and cybersecurity experience, and privacy law. Currently, Jason serves as the co-chair of the ISSA's Privacy Special Interest Group and member of the IAPP Privacy Engineering Section Advisory Board. He's also the president and principal consultant with boutique firm Enterprivacy Consulting Group and chair of the newly forming Institute of Operational Privacy Design. He can also be found on Twitter at Privacy Maverick. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much, Anita, for having me. I'm glad to be back in Australia. As everybody can see, I've been there previously 3 times, in fact, back in 2018 and 2019. Obviously didn't make it in 2020. Maybe at the end of 2021, I can get back if the world gets some semblance of, back to reality. If not, definitely 2022. I'm headed back there. So. But let's dive right in and talk about privacy by design. So I'm going to give you just a quick introduction. Then we'll talk about like what is privacy. I know this is mostly a security group, so let's talk a little bit about that. And then how to implement privacy by design. Now, obviously, we're going to have a very short session here today, so won't go into a lot of detail, but hopefully we'll give you a little bit of flavor of things to think about. And then some skills and knowledge that might be important in the future if you were to pursue a career in privacy.
Thank you, Jason. I forgot to mention, pardon me, I forgot to mention that we will, if people have got questions, put them through on the chat. We'll monitor them and then we'll sort of in between get Jason to respond to them.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so what is privacy by design? So you may have heard the phrase, you may not have, but what does it mean? Well, let me go over two things here. The General Data Protection Regulation, which is the regulation in Europe that was passed in 2016 and came into effect in 2018, includes Article 25, which is data protection by design and default. Now, that's not quite privacy by design. As the European Data Protection Board says, it's kind of a subset. Privacy is a much broader scope than just data protection. Won't get into the technicalities of that discussion or argument, but I do want to point out that the article is very short. It's only 2 paragraphs long, so it doesn't really provide a whole lot of information for how to implement data protection by design and default. The key phrases I have here are implement appropriate technical and organizational measures. Okay, how do we figure out what those are, what the appropriate ones are? And then on the default side, that just means only personal data which are necessary for each specific purpose of processing a process. Kind of a data minimization criteria, but that's really the meat and substance of it. You would think there would be a whole lot more, and in fact, if you are going to do data protection by design and default or privacy by design, you really do need to do more. So historically, privacy by design comes from Canada, and or at least has been championed from the former Information and Privacy Commissioner's Office of Ontario. Anne Cavoukian came up with her 7 principles of privacy by design. I'm not going to read them to you. They're up there. Suffice to say that, again, you give these to an engineer and they're very high level. The engineer says, okay, that's great. What do I do with this? And some of them are maybe somewhat obvious: visibility and transparency, providing notice and telling people what you're doing. Some of them are not. Privacy embedded into design. Oh, okay, these are the privacy by design principles. Shouldn't you tell me what privacy is if I'm going to embed it into the design? What is this privacy you speak of? And in fact, it says, 3 times it uses the word privacy, but it doesn't really define it. It just assumes that whoever's reading this understands what that means. And I apologize if I seem to be going fast. I want to make sure we get through the material in time. Okay, so what is privacy? So the OAIC has a fairly robust definition composed of a couple of points here: to be free from interference and intrusion, to associate freely with whom you want, to be able to control who can see or use information about you. And then looking at 3 different aspects, you have physical privacy, surveillance, and information privacy. Now, this is one particular, what I would refer to as a norm, a set of norms to define what privacy is. And there's a lot of norms out there. A really good book I would highly encourage if anybody takes a look at, Woody Hartzog's Privacy's Blueprint. And in that, he talks about his three pillars of privacy, which are obscurity, autonomy, and trust. There is Ryan Kalow's objective subjective harms. There's Alan Weston, kind of the father of information privacy and his states of privacy. I tend to look at Dan Solov and his taxonomy of privacy. And Dan has broken privacy harms into 4 broad categories and 16 discrete harms. And I think this is at once a manageable number, but also they're fairly narrow enough and detailed enough to be actionable and workable. So we have information processing and information dissemination harms, and then collection and invasion harms. Now, obviously, I don't have time to go through all 16 of these, but I do want to give you a little bit of a flavor for what each of these is to give you a kind of a broader scope. You'll notice that in security, in other words, the security of data, of personal information, is only one of the 16 harms in there up in the bottom of information processing. So let's talk about information processing. So one of the harms is secondary use. That is using information for a purpose other than what it was collected for. So in New Zealand, they have these things called Guthrie cards, and they take blood samples from newborn babies, and they're checking for genetic diseases or other ailments that may be present in the blood of a newborn. Well, come to find out 20, 30, 40 years later, they've been doing this for so long that law enforcement in New Zealand has started using it to identify bodies, to try to identify criminal suspects with DNA. And this caused quite the controversy in New Zealand a couple of years back when it was learned that these cards taken for a medical purpose are now being repurposed for law enforcement. So that is an example of secondary use of information. Information dissemination. So information processing is about what you're doing with it. Information dissemination is about giving it to someone else. Disclosure, revealing truthful information about an individual that impacts the way others judge their character or their security. So this is a television actress from the 1980s. I've given up asking people. I used to, when I first started doing this, ask people who she was, but I got so few correct answers that I gave up doing that. Her name is Rebecca Schaefer, and she was in a series called, sitcom called My Sister Sam. Well, back then in late 1980s, early 90s, I'm not sure the exact date, you could go to the California Department of Motor Vehicles and anyone with $1 could buy somebody's driver's license information. So a fan went and purchased her driver's license information, went to her house, shot her, and killed her. As a result, Congress, the US Congress, passed a law called the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, which limits disclosure of driver's license information for quote unquote legitimate purposes. There's like 12 of them: law enforcement, a court order, insurance. Again, I'm not sure what all of the 12 are, but it does limit the disclosure, and not just anybody can come and purchase that data. Now, there's some controversy because there are commercial companies that come and buy the data, and they are supposed to, by contract, adhere to, so the end user has a legitimate purpose. But sometimes they may not be very strict on who they're giving the information to. That law may need a little bit of updating, but that is disclosure. Again, information dissemination harm. Now, these first two examples I've given are about information. Now, notice I use information and not data, because data is kind of the raw data. Like, this is a photograph. If I tell you I have a bunch of photographs, a database of photographs, that doesn't really tell you much about the potential for privacy harm. That doesn't tell you about, what consequences could befall people. So I tend to use information. So here's a photo of me, and there's the data it's a photo, but the information is potentially very rich. First off, you can tell my ethnicity from the photo. I'm Caucasian. You can tell physical characteristics about me. I wear glasses. My beard has a little bit of gray, so I'm a little bit older. Identifying information. So it has my face. It's not just my elbow or some part of me that is not identifying, but now we know faces can be potentially identifying. So it's identifying information. It's unique to me. Location. Here I am at Uluru. So at some point, I was at Uluru. You may notice, it's kind of hard to see, but my hat actually says 2017. So it was subsequent to that. So it wasn't an older photo. It's not black and white, so it wasn't from the 1950s. So we can kind of potentially gauge the time frame. So the history of when this event happened. And then finally, potentially some ownership information. So I have a jacket. I have a shirt. They're not scruffy. They seem to be fairly good quality. So it gives you a little bit of my potential social standing, social economic standing. Again, the glasses are not broken or something. So there's a lot of information in this picture that could potentially be used in a problematic way. Okay, moving on to the next type of harm is interrogation. Now, we typically think about interrogation as the police interrogation or an intelligence officer interrogating a terrorist suspect. But interrogation is really any questioning or probing for personal information that is out of the context of the situation. So for instance, you may have a job interview and the interviewer may ask you completely appropriate questions. Tell me about your work history. What are your qualifications? Are you available to work these days of the week? Those sorts of things that are appropriate. But they could ask completely inappropriate questions like, are you pregnant? Are you married? Things that would be problematic and problematic from the recipient's perspective. Now, notice this doesn't say information collection. I just refer to it as collection because it's not about the information. It's not about her response to the question and what may be done with it. Just the asking of the question, the act of collecting, that's the privacy problem here. Okay, last category is invasion. And that's decisional. So the first one in here is decisional interference, interfering with an individual's decision making. So we can think about a family sitting around dinner, and your parents may have done this to you. You may be doing it to your kids, but using manipulative techniques to interfere with the decision making of the kids. So guilt. I work so hard to put this broccoli on the table for you, and you're not going to eat it. Comparing. Your brother eats his broccoli. Why aren't you? Let's see what else. Gifts and favors. If you eat all your broccoli, I'll let you play an extra hour of video games tonight. So these are all known manipulative techniques. It's not persuasion, where you're trying to persuade the kid, oh, this is healthy for you, this is good for you. You're using a manipulative technique to get them. Now, maybe it's counteracted by the fact that this is good for them, that eating their vegetables is good, but it doesn't change the fact that you're using a psychological technique to try to alter their behavior. Now, this doesn't just happen around the dinner table. It happens online as well. This is a interface at a well-known social network, which shall not be named, which is trying to collect people's Gmail contact list. So it's using a couple of things. First off, it says every career needs a strong network. That is appeal to the need to belong. Humans are very social creatures. Now, you don't need to use this feature to use this social network, but they're trying to present to you, hey, you want to belong, right? You want to be part of this group. You need to do this action. Now, next, you'll notice that there's a big blue continue button. What do people do when they see big buttons? They don't read what's on there. They just go, oh yeah, I need to get through this. Let me hit continue. So they may hit continue. This is called system one thinking. It's that automatic, unconscious, intuitive act. They don't want you to examine what's going on. They just want to draw your attention to this button and have you click it. Now, if you're careful and you're like, wait, whoa, what's going on? You'll notice there's a skip button, but it's gray text on a gray background. Hard to see, hard to find, not as prominent as the continue. Now, what happens if you click this button? They pop up a dialog box. So this is called nudging. If you had selected the one they wanted, the continue button, they wouldn't have popped up a dialog box. But when you go in a direction counter to where they want to push you, they're going to try to put impediments in your way. So not only are they nudging you, you'll notice, and it may be hard to see on your screen, but it asks the question, are you sure you want to skip this step? That is a yes or no question. Yes, I want to skip it. No, I don't want to skip it. But the answers here are skip and continue. So am I skipping the skip, or am I skipping the original process? Am I continuing the skip, or am I continuing their original process? I mean, the only thing that kind of suggests the continue is still a blue button, which suggests that that's where they want you to go, and that's actually to continue connecting to your Google contacts.
So Jason, I might ask you to pause there, because you've spoken about the 4 items, and I know there's a couple of questions in the chat as well. But what's the implication as a result of this scenario that you've given us here?
I'm sorry, come again?
What are some of the implications as a result of this design?
So what are the implications? I mean, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I mean, the implication is the person gets manipulated into doing something that they otherwise would not have done. Yeah. For instance, accidentally connecting their Google contact. So you can't tell here because I've hidden out the email account, but when you register with this site, if they notice you have a Gmail account, they auto-populate it. So you may just hit continue and not realize that now you've given access to this social network to pull in your Google contact. So maybe your ex-spouse is still in your Google contacts, and now this social network is going to send them a friend request or let them know that you are on this site. there was a situation a while ago where a psychologist who was not, this was Facebook, but she was not on Facebook, but two of her clients got notified that they were a mutual connection, even though she wasn't there, because they had both shared their contact list, and the psychologist was on the contact list. So there's all sorts of things that can come from this, but the ultimate problem here is that somebody is being manipulated into doing something that they might otherwise not do. Okay. Great. Now, there's two ways to think about building in privacy. I tend to focus mostly at the product, service, or process level. The book that Anita held up earlier, My Strategic Privacy by Design, is focused on this. If you're wanting to build privacy into a product, if you're wanting to build privacy into a service, or some business process like an HR recruiting process, you would use that. You can also think of it at an organizational level and tend to if you're a large organization, that might be a better approach, but you may miss some things if you're missing at the product level. Let me talk about the kind of distinguish the two. So this is a very high level of basically a single slide for my entire book. But the first thing you need to do is what's called threat modeling, and that's identify sources and means of threat. Security, it's relatively easier. You have outside hackers, or you have internal personnel that may be doing something nefarious. Privacy, with a whole bunch of different privacy harms, you have to think of a lot of different sources of threats. Vendors, other customers, your internal internal business department, the marketing department may take data and start using it inappropriately. So like an HR vendor may have secondary use of employee data. So you're giving it to the HR vendor. It's not like they hacked in. You're giving it for a particular purpose. They're just going to go and use it for a secondary purpose. So then the second step in privacy by design is risk analysis. So, and we look at risk from risk to an individual's perspective, not to the organization. And I put up the five kind of main factors in the risk analysis. The opportunity of the threat actor, what opportunity have you presented them, like the HR vendor giving them data? Are they motivated? Will they make money? Are they trying to do something illegal so they're unmotivated? How difficult have you made it? So again, if you're giving HR vendor kind of only high level salary data, but you're not giving them specific line item per employee, it's more difficult for them to do certain things that maybe they would want to do against the individual employee. The severity. Now this goes to how against normative principles are this, how bad is this? Is it the interviewer asking a question that may be a little personal, like what's your favorite sport, which really doesn't have a bearing on the job. So it's kind of annoying, but it's not really not really relevant. It's an interrogation. Or are they asking you if you're pregnant, or something that would be seems more severe, that society would look at worse. And then consequences, which are like secondary consequences. So it could be internal, like embarrassment or fear of not getting a job. Or it could be, externally applied. Identity theft, you lose money, you lose an opportunity for a job, lose an opportunity for housing, somebody hurts you as a result. So these are all kind of like secondary consequence as a result of this privacy harm. So you may hear risk written in terms of likelihood and impact, and the red factors here are kind of go to the likelihood of this happening, and the green are the impact. How severe is it, and how bad are the consequences as a result? Now, the third kind of step, and this is very shorthanded, but the third step is, now that we know the risk factors for any particular harm, what can we do about them? And that is applying privacy design strategies and ultimately tactics under them, and then finally techniques for doing them. So minimizing information might reduce opportunity. The less information we're giving our HR vendor, the less opportunity they have to do things. Supervise, enforcing a policy. If in our contract it says you're not allowed to do this, do anything else with this other than process the data for our purposes, and if you don't, you're going to lose the contract. That reduces their motivation. So again, these design strategies help go against particular risk factors, and ultimately the goal is to reduce risk. Now, that is for an individual process or service, but if you want to look at the organizational level, you can build in privacy as well. So I've recently been using the NIST privacy framework, which is the U.S. National Institutes of Standards. Again, way condensing this into a single slide, but NIST has 5 functions in their framework. And within each function, there are categories and subcategories. And the subcategories are very specific things, like data actions of system, products, and services are inventoried. It's part of the identify. In other words, identify, inventory your systems, products, and services, or at least the data actions within. But what does that mean when the boots hit the ground? So you can think of the framework as a muffin pan, right? So it frames what you're building. You're not building a big round cake. You're not building a square cake. You're building muffins. Now, the question is, are you building blueberry muffins? Are you building cornbread? Does your cornbread have jalapenos in it? Are you building cupcakes? There's a lot of different things that you can put into this framework. And so how do you go about doing that? Well, you can take the Solov taxonomy and say, okay, we're concerned about the secondary use and the disclosure of personal information. So now we build, so one of the ingredients, I've only listed one just for space consideration, might be all touch points for message data, and this is for a communications company, are kept in a system architecture diagram. So you might have that in your policies or your procedures or architectural requirements of here's how we're going to go about building. So again, you can go through each of the framework subcategories, each of the muffin holders, and determine what ingredients will help you achieve what goal relative to your business. Okay.
Jason, I might ask you just to pause there for a moment. I know that we're sort of towards the end of this, and we've got just, less 15 minutes left, and there's a few questions. But with regards to the organizational level and wanting to actually set up, a privacy center of excellence, obviously having a framework to start with is a great idea. And, if you did have that framework and you're a privacy practitioner, where would you start? What are the key areas that or categories would you look at? Where would you start? And how would you prioritize them?
So a very good, complicated question. So there's a lot of ways to attack that. First off, I just want to emphasize, so NIST also has a cybersecurity framework. And so if your organization, which has been around for 5-6 years, so if your organization is already using the cybersecurity framework, that's a good way to parlay into using the privacy framework. If you're an ISO shop, it might be a little bit better to use, some of the ISO standards as opposed. But assuming you're going to use the privacy framework, what I do for clients is first try to understand their business. Try to figure out which of the Solov taxonomy harms are important to them, because not all of them are important to every business, and prioritize that way for one. And then look at, try to come up with these ingredients for each of the subcategories. Lay that out, and then look at and try to identify, and kind of using the same risk model that I did before, identify where is your, and by the way, I didn't go into it, but the NIST privacy framework is very risk centric. So it really tried to help with that prioritization and identifying risk. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you how to do that. It just says you need to do this. So going through and trying to prioritize each of these, so looking at each of these and say which of these subcategories and which of these ingredients do we not have, and if we don't have, how is that going to affect our risk ultimately? Not an easy process, but certainly manageable potentially. So
thank you.
I've only got like I think 3 slides left.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if you're thinking about getting into privacy, you want to move from security to privacy, what is important for you to know? So I want to tell you about the NICE framework, which is another NIST initiative, which deals with cybersecurity and now privacy skills. And they will be publishing their privacy knowledge and skill sets coming up hopefully in the next couple of months. You should look for that, and that will go into really detail. And what they're hoping organizations will do is use these knowledge and skills to populate job descriptions, so that they can track them back to tasks within the organization and then job roles. Again, that's something a little bit for the future. For right now, here's where I would suggest you put your attention. Just familiarize yourself with some principles and laws, just kind of the ones that are extremely important, and 7 foundational principles, the Australian privacy principles, since that's where you are, the OECD privacy principles, the GDPR's principles of processing data, and then California Consumer Privacy Act if you're doing any kind of business with the US, just because California, as the saying goes, as goes California, so goes the US. So eventually that's going to spread throughout. Technologically wise, getting a good basic understanding of technology is, I think, very important in this field. I've seen a lot of lawyers falter because they don't have the technology chops, and it's hard to negotiate a contract that has a lot of technological terms if you don't understand, what's behind that. Understanding encryption and data security. I mean, that's foundational nowadays. You've got to understand how different types of encryption work, symmetric encryption, public key cryptography, hashing. Familiarize yourself with privacy enhancing technologies. You don't need to become an expert in any of this, but the more you read about it and the more you're able to speak intelligently, or at least even more importantly, listen intelligently. You go to a talk on one of these and you'll pick up more and more things. And as you pick up more, you'll understand more at the next talk you go to. Of course, the frameworks, the privacy framework, there's the Apex privacy framework. I'm not a big fan of, but then again, I'm not over in the Asia Pacific region, so I don't know enough about it. But and then understanding privacy risk. I went over it very high level. There's more information out there. There are several different risk models. Fair privacy, which I promote. NIST has a privacy risk assessment model. There's the KU LUFA model, and then CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, had a model. Okay, here's some additional resources that are the slides going to be available, or Anita, I don't know how you're going to make these.
Yeah,
resources.
I will. I'll send the slides to
okay.
the attendees.
Normally, please forgive me, normally I'm not this self-promotional, but Anita suggested I put this in here. I'm offering, if I have a Privacy by Design online course coming up in February, and if you're interested, I'm offering a significant discount if you use that code in there. So
oh, thank you, Jason. That's fantastic. We do have people from across the globe on the call, so they'll be able to use it as well. We've got people from
anybody
Saudi Arabia.
Anybody who hears it can use it. Okay.
Fantastic.
Question.
Yeah, we do. We've got some questions. Viviana, would you like to ask the question directly to Jason, or would you like me to read it out?
You can read it.
Thank you, Vivian. Okay, certainly. Okay, so here we go. So Viviana's asking, it's on the chat as well, Jason. So requests for opting out of marketing communications have to be answered in what time frame? Is it 1 month? I guess it depends what country you're in.
That's very jurisdiction specific, right?
Yeah.
Are you talking about in California? Are you talking about in Australia? Are you talking about under the e-privacy directive? And so even though I am a lawyer, I'm hesitant to try to answer this question without knowing more and doing research. Generally, a lot of requests within privacy laws are 30 days. CCPA has some 45-day requirements. I'm not sure what like Canada, and I have no clue about Australia at all. So I would not even attempt to opine on that for Australia.
I'm not sure on that because I haven't sort of looked at it recently, but you're absolutely right. Looking at the actual jurisdictional regulations is the first place that you need to go to gain an understanding of that. Thank you. Kevin, would you like to ask the next lot of questions?
Oh, yes, sure. Thank you very much, Jason. That was very interesting. First question, I think, relevant for our members and even attendees today. Many of our are applying for work in the field of privacy. So, as a privacy officer expert, what kind of interview questions should people, and what type of answers make for a compelling?
And so it's difficult to pinpoint. Privacy lawyer is going to be different than a privacy engineer. It's probably going to be different than a privacy analyst. So it's very different. What I would say is having a good conceptualization of privacy and understanding what privacy is. So if you get that question, right? So now I'll tell you, in my first job, privacy job, I was interviewing with the CISO, and I asked them what they thought privacy was. I short-circuited getting asked that question. But that would be a question I would ask if I were interviewing for a large company. What do you think privacy is? Being able to answer that, and I will tell you, I can tell you what the wrong answer is. I can't tell you what the right answer is because there are many right answers. The wrong answer is, from my perspective, confidentiality or security of personal data. That's a very limited scope. If you're applying for a security role, that's great. But if you're applying for a privacy role, I would want a better, broader understanding of that. Yes.
Very good. Thank you. I have another question. I'm not sure if you have seen the news in Australia. The text is in the chat there. But essentially, an article in the Guardian newspaper released yesterday was written. There was an investigation done and an error revealed by the Guardian for 10,000 asylum seekers who were trying to get asylum in Australia who had their personal information exposed. So this was exposed in an Australian site, included gender, citizenship, name, date of birth, period of immigration detention, and reasons that led them to become an asylum seeker. So really personal information. The Australian government has been asked to pay between $500 and $20,000 to just over 1,000 of these people. And my question is, do you see rulings like this as being positive? And you can define positive however you like. And how do you think this ruling would affect organizations in the future?
Can I define positive as negative?
Of course, yeah.
I got a privacy lawyer joke, but I don't think I have time for that. So any attention to privacy is better than none. You know, the concern about, at least from my perspective, about punishing government by paying for wrongdoing is you're not really punishing, because the people who ultimately pay are the taxpayers who didn't have any decision in this. Now, does it, you know, provide some type of relief to the people who are affected? Maybe. Is financial compensation really worth having your information released? So it's a very complex topic, and so I can't really say. Again, I'd say positive from the perspective of some attention is being paid, but I don't know if that's the right necessary move, as opposed to getting rid of the people or who did this, and ultimately putting in better processes in place within the government.
So process over financial, yeah.
Yeah. That being said, I mean, I think for the people who got affected, giving them something is better than giving them nothing. So, I do see Vivian answer or ask another question. I didn't read the entire thing, but so one of the things that intrigued me, and this is a pet peeve of mine, so including a box to be checked if a customer agrees to a privacy policy. So I've counseled many a client on this, and that is fundamentally problematic, because what you're doing, you're not asking people to agree to the privacy policy. What you're asking them to, at least under GDPR world, which is where I put my mindset mostly, is you're asking to acknowledge that they have read it. Because you're not asking for consent, because if so, that is not consent. You're tying consent to provision of the service, which is not appropriate under GDPR, because it's deemed a imbalance of power between the service provider and the person consenting. So what you should see is I have read the privacy notice, not that I agree to it. So because if that's the option, then there should also be an option, I don't agree to it and I still want to use your service. So,
Yes,
sorry,
thank you.
pet peeve of mine.
Thank you very much, Jason. I do want to very quickly, we're just on time, but there's one question. In Australia, our last reporting from OAC was that the data breach reporting showed that the data breaches occur pretty much 38 as a result of human errors. So 38% of the breaches have been as a result of human errors, and it's actually increasing. I'm keen to get your thoughts on what you're seeing your side of the world as a result of humans causing the breaches.
So to be honest, I for years I have purposely kind of isolated myself from data breaches, because I thought there was too much focus in the privacy community on data breaches. Security community, I agree, it's absolutely important to understand and understand where are the sources of the exposure. Is it internal people purposely releasing? Is it human error? Is it hackers? Is it people leaving hard drives in cabs so that you can shut that off? Absolutely important. But in terms of like statistics and what's going on in the data breach world, that's really outside of my scope. I really try to focus on the non-security privacy issues, because I think that's where there is a lack of attention at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. And do you think organizations are actually investing in the capability of their teams and staff to mitigate the risks of breaches? Are you seeing that?
Are they doing what to their staff?
Are they investing in uplifting their capability and knowledge?
Oh. God, that's a broad question. I think companies are trying to hire people who have the skill set rather than investing in improving the skill set of the people they have. Right. That generally has been, I mean, that's been a trend not just in security, but across the corporate world, right? They hire people rather than train the people. I remember my dad used to work for AT&T back in the 70s, and he was a director, and his thing was he found somebody smart and then he trained them to do what he needed done, right? He didn't care if they had skill, whatever the skill, if they were smart and capable, and then they could be trained to do it. Then nowadays it's the opposite. They want somebody with the skill, not necessarily the smarts to transfer.
Okay, great. Well, Jason, that's a really great lead-in to the next few slides that I'm going to share. And that's really around the purpose of of WiCyS organisations. I might just share my screen with a few slides, but I did want to let everyone know that there are special joining prices as part of the WiCyS organisation. They range from industry professional, in addition to being an academic, students and veterans. And there's actually also a special COVID-19 membership relief, $10 US dollars, for those that have been impacted as a result of COVID. So you can go onto the website and have a look at all of that. WiCyS Australia every month holds a meet and greet with their members, and the purpose of that is to take them through the offerings, the events that are upcoming, but also it's getting to know each of our members and hear about their stories and experiences. WiCyS is also conducting we've got some fantastic biannual career fairs that take place. The next one is taking place on the 26th of March, AEDT, which is the 25th of March, US time. So keep an eye out on that, and the communications will definitely be communicating it, but the actual time is yet to be advised. Without further ado, that's really it from Australia. And Kevin, thank you very much. Jason, thank you very much for your time and preparation and contribution to the WiCyS Australia community and all of our cybersecurity leaders and privacy professionals who are wanting to learn. We look forward to catching up with you. I think we can probably have some further sessions in the future focusing on specific topics. There's certainly a few things that you've refreshed my memory on some of the things that I learned at your workshop. So thank you also for the discount offer that you're going to run for the next upcoming workshop. And I'll be able to send that through. It's updated in your slides, and I'll send through the slides to the registrants in the next 48 hours. Thank you so much to Anne as well. And thank you to all of our attendees who've dialed in from across the globe, Saudi Arabia, US, and many European countries, as well as Australia. Happy International Privacy Day, everybody. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, Jason.
Happy International Privacy Day, everybody. If anybody wants to hear my privacy lawyer joke, I'll tell it to you. So a security engineer, a privacy engineer, and a privacy lawyer in a room, and the company is going to start collecting faces, and they're concerned about what to do about the privacy. Security engineer says, no problem, I got this. We'll encrypt the faces. We'll put in access restrictions, all well and good. And the privacy engineer says, no, we need to build in consent, and we need to make sure that the metadata goes with the faces, so we know we have consent of the people to collect and use their faces. The privacy lawyer says, no worries at all. I'm just going to write in our privacy notice that faces are not personal data.
Love it. How old is that joke, Jason?
So I actually heard it as a philosopher, a mathematician, and an engineer back 30 years ago, and then I applied it to this situation.
Love it. Okay, you don't seem old enough to have heard it 30 years ago, but nevertheless, thank you so much. Have a great day. Your International Privacy Day is tomorrow. So have a great day, and thank you again for everybody. Thank you, Janelle, as well. Bye-bye.